The calves are one of those muscle groups a lot of people really struggle to develop. For some, it seems like whatever you do, you can't get them to grow. Unfortunately, a lot of people make some key mistakes when training their calves that limit them from truly developing. To address this, we want to understand their anatomy, their regional differences, their biomechanical functions, length-tension relationships, and more. The calf is made up of a lot of muscles, but the two most notable muscles are the gastrocnemius and soleus. The gastrocnemius has two heads, one medial and one lateral. Each originates just above either side of the back of the knee, then crosses down, meeting up with the soleus, which starts on the back of the tibia and fibula, where they then meet up and attach to the Achilles tendon, which inserts under the calcaneus or heel bone. The gastroc is the more superficial of the two, covering the soleus. Due to their origin and insertion, both muscles function to plantar flex the ankle, where we point our foot down, like pushing on a gas pedal. In addition to this, the gastroc also assists in knee flexion, where we bend our knee, since it crosses the back side of the knee. Given these details about the anatomy and general functions, we can start to look at how we can preference different parts of the calf. For instance, while both muscles plantar flex the ankle, the gastroc begins to reduce in its ability to produce force as the knee reaches greater degrees of knee flexion. So when looking to focus in on the soleus, we want to try and get into deeper ranges of knee flexion, likely 60 degrees or more. You may be wondering, why would you try to focus on the soleus? Well, while the gastroc often gets the most love since it's the superficial one that we primarily see, the soleus actually makes up way more size. It's a bigger, more powerful muscle, and it will make the gastroc pop out more when it's bigger. This means we should be giving the soleus way more TLC. In addition to trying to preference the soleus versus the gastroc, we can also preference the medial or lateral heads of the gastroc. The premise is that by changing which way the feet point, we're able to focus on the different gastroc heads. This topic has been researched a lot, and up until last year, the research was fairly mixed, either showing some effect or no effect. However, all of the research had just been short-term EMG studies, which are hard to interpret in the long term, trying to figure out what effects come from it. Fortunately, Nunes 2020 took the research a step forward and completed a 9-week study where they had people train calves 3 times a week, either having their toes pointed out, pointed in, or toes pointed forward. They found that the group pointing their toes out had a significantly greater amount of hypertrophy in the medial gastroc. In contrast, they saw that the group pointing their toes inwards had a significantly greater amount of hypertrophy in the lateral gastroc. So if you're someone who finds that one of your gastrocs is more limited or less developed and you want to bring it up, then you want to incorporate some sort of change in your toe position in the movements that we're about to discuss. Now, looking at these factors, we end up having 2 primary categories for options of calf training: straight knee emphasizing the gastroc, and bent knee emphasizing the soleus. Looking at straight knee variations, I have a few favorites. The first one is the standard deficit single leg calf raise. You can add resistance to this with a weight vest, dumbbell, or whatever you want. When doing it, I highly recommend holding on to something so that you can focus on working the calf and not balancing. The deficit here allows you to get into a bigger range of motion, sink into a good stretch to work the calf through that deeper range. When doing this, I really recommend adding in a solid pause at the bottom of the movement. This will help to dissipate the strong stretching reflex and elastic response that comes from the Achilles tendon and get more of a muscle focus. You can also pause at the top, which I think is beneficial since it will give you more feedback on if you're actually using full range or not, which is a common problem for a lot of people at that top range. Now, while doing this exercise, I recommend sticking to a bit higher reps for it, such as 8 to 30 reps. The calf muscles have a high predominance of slow twitch fibers, and it may be beneficial to do higher reps for them. In contrast, for our second exercise, the standing deficit calf raise, I think you should go into lower rep ranges, such as 5 to 10. Since this is a bilateral, stable exercise, we can load it up real heavy and try to get into the more stronger, explosive, fast twitch fibers. Execute the movement the same way as the prior, with a good pause at the bottom and maybe at the top as well. To load this exercise up, you have a few main options. If you have access to a standing calf raise or donkey calf raise machine, those work great. If you have access to a safety squat bar, you can load that up and then hold on to the uprights, and that works great. If you have access to a dip belt, you can load that sucker up really well and set up the same way. If you only have access to a barbell or dumbbells, then I'd suggest doing the exercise just on flat ground, since it's a bit dangerous to be rocking back and forth on the deficit without some way of having some additional balance and holding on to something. These two options are going to be the main ones when it comes to focusing on the straight knee variates. For bent knee, we can have a similar breakdown. Our first exercise is the single leg soleus raise. Here we set up holding on to something sturdy, then bend our knee so we can get down to at least 60 degrees of knee flexion, then do a calf raise while maintaining that knee flexion. As you go up and down, you want to think to keep your knee forward and have your body move as a unit, not standing up each rep. Stick with using a pause at the bottom and really trying to stop and diminish that stretch reflex each rep. You want to do higher reps here, just like with the earlier one, so if you find that you can bust out a lot of reps, add some resistance like a dumbbell, bands, weight vest, or whatever you have access to. For the second bent knee option, a seated calf raise is going to be our best option for loading it up heavy. Since this can be a really stable movement that we can push effort on well, it's going to be great to work into those lower rep ranges to challenge those more fast twitch fibers. If you have access to a seated calf raise machine, that's going to be ideal since you can load it up and get into the position no problem. If you don't, doing it with a heavy barbell across your lap works very well. You want to have a pad across your lap, and if possible, have something to elevate your toes on to get into that deeper range. If you don't have a barbell, you can also load up some heavy dumbbells on your lap in the same setup. And if you don't have any resistance option that works well for this, another way that you can do a hard effort bent knee variation is to sit up by a wall or an upright of some kind, and then place a pad against it at around knee height. And then you're going to sit up with your foot about a foot away from the wall, then bring your knee forward, going onto your toes, and then push your knee against the wall and get into a strong stance. From here, you're going to push as hard as you can with your calf to drive your knee through that pad. You can either do short holds for multiple reps, such as 6 reps of 5 seconds, or you can just do one longer hold for 30 to 60 seconds. These exercises are going to be the best variations to truly hit the calf across each major region and comprehensively develop it. Experiment with them, changing knee flexion as you feel works best for you, using a longer or shorter pause at the bottom and top, and playing with the toes in and toes out position. And with that, you got the best calf exercises and how to truly develop your calf. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
But you don't really need calves.
You need calves.
They don't.
Calves are critical.
No, I don't have any and I do fine.
Fine is probably true.